Someone knows who did this.
I know that it's never going to bring my mom back, but it does have a ridiculous release of closure.
A 70-year-old Gary Edward Gloaz for the December 1987 murder of Melissa Taylor Ellison, who at the time of her tragic death was a 20-year-old mother. Melissa Ellison's murder occurred during a home burglary 39 years ago. This case was investigated, continuously reinvestigated, and ultimately solved by dedicated detectives assigned to the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office Cold Case Unit. In the very early morning hours of December 28, 1987, Melissa Ellison was found deceased in her home at 3611 Cole John Road. It was determined that she died due to blunt force head trauma. Because this case is now an active murder prosecution being handled by our partners at the State Attorney's Office, I cannot share additional factual details nor how Boaz was identified as a perpetrator of this heinous act of violence. Homicide investigations are very complex. Forensics can take a long time to complete, and technologies surrounding these investigations continue to advance and evolve. He has a history of burglary.
On the 15th of January 2026, a 39-year-old woman named Cassie Ellison sat in front of a camera and spoke to a person she had never met. She was not addressing the police. She was addressing whoever had spent 38 years knowing what happened to her mother and saying nothing. Silence does not change facts. Living a normal life does not undo taking someone else's. If you know something, say it. If you heard something, report it. 6 months later, on the 8th of July, a 70-year-old man walked into a ViStar credit union in Clay County, Florida, and telephoned the sheriff's office. He told the dispatcher he wanted to provide information about the death of Melissa Ellison. By the end of that day, he was in an interview room in Jacksonville. By the following morning, he was in the Duval County Jail, held without bond, charged with her murder. Prosecutors have not said what he told them. The case is pending, and the arrest report gives up almost nothing. What is known is the sequence. A daughter asked in public for somebody to speak, and eventually somebody picked up a phone. Melissa Taylor was the second oldest of 5 sisters. That is a specific kind of position in a family, old enough to be relied on, young enough to still be one of the girls. Her family described her in terms that are almost defiantly ordinary. She loved the sun. She spent her time at the pool or at the beach. She would give away the shirt off her back if she thought somebody needed it more. She had a talent, according to her family, for making everyone feel like her best friend. She went to Ed White High School on Jacksonville's west side. She married not long after graduating and became pregnant shortly after that. Her family said she was thrilled about it and that she took the job of being a mother seriously in the way that very young mothers sometimes do, as a role to be earned rather than a thing that had happened to her. Her daughter, Casey, was born in November 1986. Most people did not call her Melissa. She was Missy Taylor to almost everyone who knew her, which is the kind of detail that tells you something about how a person moved through a town. By late 1987, the marriage had ended. She and Mark Ellison had separated, and Missy was living in a mobile home on Collageon Court off Normandy Boulevard on Jacksonville's west side with Casey. To manage the bills, she had asked 2 friends, Charlene Boger and Wayne Contreras, to move in with her. She was 20 years old. She had a 13-month-old daughter, a separation, a rented trailer, and 2 roommates helping cover the rent. There is a photograph of her taken shortly before she died. She is holding Casey. It is not a formal portrait. It is the kind of picture that exists in every family in the world, and it is now the picture that gets shown at press conferences. The last week of December 1987 sits in that flat stretch between Christmas and New Year when the days lose their names. On the night of the 27th, Missy spoke to her mother. During that conversation, she said she was scared. She would not explain why. Her mother pressed her on it, reasonably, because it did not seem to add up. Missy was not alone. She had 2 roommates in the house with her. Whatever was frightening her, she had company, and she had a door that locked. She did not elaborate. That is where the record of that conversation ends. What happened during the night has been assembled from the accounts of the people who were in the trailer and one neighbor outside it. At some point after 2 in the morning, a neighbor heard people arguing outside. Then he heard a vehicle accelerate hard and leave. Inside, Charlene Boger woke because Casey was crying. She found the baby in the living room, on the couch, with pillows tucked in around her, as though somebody had arranged them to stop her rolling off. Boger's assumption was mundane and reasonable and wrong. She thought that Missy had a visitor in her bedroom, her estranged husband or a date, and had moved the baby out so as not to have her in the room. So Boger lay down on the couch with Cassie and went back to sleep. She woke again when the back door slammed. Wayne Contreras said that at some point someone shone a flashlight on him and then ran out through the back of the trailer. At about 20 minutes to 5 in the morning on the 28th of December, Jacksonville police were called to Collageon Road on a report of a dead person. They found Melissa Ellison in her bed. She had been beaten about the head. The medical examiner ruled the death a homicide and gave the cause as blunt force head trauma. She had been clubbed to death in her own bedroom, a few feet from where her daughter had been left on the couch. Cassie was unharmed. That is the detail that has followed this case for 39 years. Whoever came into that trailer left a 13-month-old child physically untouched and, if the pillows mean what they appear to mean, took a moment to arrange her so she would not fall. The case did not begin as a mystery without evidence. It began as a case with a striking amount of it. There were shoe prints inside the mobile home. There was a charcoal handprint on Missy's arm. There were tire tracks on the back patio. And the night after the murder, someone called 911. The caller referred to Missy's death and said, "I'm sorry, I had to do it." The initial theory was straightforward. There had been a string of burglaries in that mobile home park, and this looked like one that had gone wrong. An intruder who expected an empty trailer, a young woman who woke up. Then detectives worked out what was missing from the house, and the theory came apart. 2 items were gone. A set of keys that Missy had borrowed, and 2 photographs of her in a bathing suit. A burglar takes things that can be sold. Nobody drives away from a robbery with 2 snapshots of the victim in a swimsuit. Whatever that was, it was not commerce. The burglary theory was set aside, and the case moved from who was stealing in this trailer park to who was interested in this specific woman, which is a much harder question and one that produced no answer for 39 years. Her funeral was packed. Every seat taken, people standing along the walls and outside. Her sister Glenda remembered a police escort telling her parents that the procession running down the interstate from the funeral home on the west side to the cemetery in Orange Park was more than 3 miles of cars. And then the case became the thing that cold cases become, a file that is reviewed and reviewed again and does not move. Cassie grew up. She had no memory of her mother. She was 13 months old, which means she grew up with a photograph and other people's stories and an absence that had no shape to it. "It's been 35 years and life goes on without your loved one," she said in an earlier interview. "You just get used to it. You're walking around with a giant crater and it cracked your world to the core. That's simply the new normal, a hole in your heart." Her aunt Glenda put it in harder terms. "It has eaten us alive." In recent years, the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office Cold Case Unit had returned to the file with a specific method. One detective described the approach as working the case as though it were happening now rather than in 1987, applying current technology and current thinking to old material and treating the file as live rather than historical. Detectives also had a long-standing problem with the shape of the case. As one investigator put it, the circumstances did not make sense in 1987 and still did not make sense. There were details in the original accounts that had never fit together properly. But the decisive move was not forensic, it was a decision to make noise. On the 15th of January 2026, First Coast Crime Stoppers and Project, Cold Case, ran a live-streamed news conference built entirely around Missy Taylor Ellison, not a press release. A digital event designed to put the family in front of a camera and let them speak directly to whoever was still out there. The reasoning from the executive director of First Coast Crime Stoppers was explicit. These events are not about revisiting the past. They are about manufacturing a moment of urgency, the possibility that one person watching might hear a detail again or recognize something they had once dismissed. Glenda Blandford spoke about her sister's funeral, and then she widened her address beyond the killer. "My message today is not just for her killers, but all those involved in covering it up, all those involved in not speaking up. I want you to know that your actions have caused so much pain for my family." A $5,000 reward was offered. And Cassie Ellison, 39 years old, older than her mother ever got to be, said the lines that would sit for 6 months before anything happened. "Silence does not change facts. Living a normal life does not undo taking someone else's." A detective later confirmed that the January appeal worked. Information came forward as a result of it, and it played a pivotal role in what followed. On the 8th of July 2026, Gary Edward Gloatches was at a ViStar credit union in Clay County when he telephoned the sheriff's office dispatch there. He said he wanted to provide information about the death of Melissa Ellison. He was 70 years old, a resident of Middleburg in Clay County, the next county over from Jacksonville. He would have been 31 in December 1987. Clay County did not simply take a statement. They coordinated with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office Cold Case Unit, and Glowacz was transported to Jacksonville, where detectives interviewed him. What was said in that room has not been released. Police have declined to say why they moved as fast as they did. What is on the record is the outcome. Detectives obtained an arrest warrant. Within hours of making the call himself, Gary Glowacz was booked into the Duval County Jail, held without bond, charged with second-degree murder with a weapon and burglary with assault or battery. Sheriff TK Waters announced it the following day, on the 9th of July, with Missy's family seated in the room. He said the killing had happened during a home burglary and that the cold case unit had identified the burglar who committed it. He also said Glowacz had a history of committing burglaries. Court records support that. Glowacz has an arrest history spanning multiple counties in several decades, including burglary and grand theft. In 1986, the year before the murder, adjudication was withheld on a burglary charge, meaning the court did not enter a formal conviction. He was found guilty of purchasing cocaine in 1989 and again in 1996. In 1998, he was convicted of burglary. As recently as 2016, he was charged with driving under the influence in Clay County and later pleaded guilty. That record is worth sitting with. This was not a man who had eluded detection. He had been in and out of the system repeatedly in the same region for 40 years. He was arrested, charged, convicted, and released. His name was in county files continuously. He simply was never connected to a trailer on Collision Court. The sheriff's office has provided no information about what Glowacz was doing in the 39 years between the murder and the phone call beyond that record. He lived in Jacksonville and in Middleburg. He grew old 30 miles from where Missy Taylor Ellison died. Waters addressed the length of it directly. Television, he said, has conditioned people to believe that a homicide not solved in the first 48 hours will never be solved, and that this is simply untrue. Homicide investigations are complex, forensics take time, and the technology surrounding them changes. Gary Glowacz has been charged. He has not been tried, and he has not been convicted. He remains in custody awaiting trial, and everything alleged about his involvement remains an allegation that the state must prove. The central question this case raises is one that no document currently available can answer. He was not caught. There was no DNA match, no surveillance operation, no knock at the door. Nobody had gone looking for him. On the morning of the 8th of July 2026, a 70-year-old man in Clay County was, as far as the record shows, in no danger whatsoever from an investigation that had failed to name him for 39 years. And he made a telephone call. Prosecutors have not said whether he confessed. They have not said whether he called to implicate himself, or to implicate someone else, or to offer a version of events that collapsed under questioning. They have not said whether the information that came in after January was already closing on him and he knew it. Any of those explanations would fit the facts as they are currently public. So would others. What can be said is that 6 months earlier, a woman he had never met sat in front of a camera and said that living a normal life does not undo taking someone else's, and that a person who had been living what appeared to be a normal life subsequently drove to a credit union and dialed a sheriff's office. Casey Ellison was 13 months old when her mother was killed, and somebody arranged pillows around her on a couch. She was 39 when she learned a name. "I know that it's never going to bring my mum back," she said, "but it does have a ridiculous release of closure." She said the arrest had made her see the world differently, which is a strange and precise thing to say, and it makes sense only if you have spent your entire conscious life in a world with a specific piece missing, and then, at 39, watch somebody put it back.